Welcome to the Friendly City Books podcast. My name is Emily Liner, and I'm the owner of Friendly City Books in Columbus, Mississippi. And I'm really excited to talk today to my new friend, Jumata Emill. Not Emily, but Emill. And he is the author of two books. His debut young adult novel was The Black Queen. And the new one, which we're going to be talking about today, is Wander in the Dark. This copy that I'm holding up is an advanced copy, but it's going to be in hardcover too. The Black Queen is actually now out in paperback as well. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Emily. I've been so looking forward to this chat.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I'm really excited. We have lots of things to talk about. Some fun things, some serious things, some Southern things.
Yes.
So let's start out. Where are you right now?
So I'm based right now in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which is where I was born and raised. But after I graduated college, I spent 5 years in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, where I had my first job as a newspaper reporter. I worked for the Hattiesburg American, and so I covered crime and local politics there.
That is so wild. So what was it like in Mississippi? Like, I mean, because Mississippi and Louisiana, especially in Southern Mississippi, like we feel like we have a lot in common. Like, what did you think?
For sure. That's very, very true. It was just an extension of Baton Rouge, basically. It just on like a smaller scale, I would say Hattiesburg was kind of like a college town. It's really driven by the University of Southern Mississippi. Where I come from, Baton Rouge, where we're just like a college town on steroids because we have LSU and we have Southern University, which is a historically Black college. So it's just on a larger scale of like, much more, football and sports and, the college kids kind of drive the social economy here. And I felt the same about Hattiesburg. But what was interesting about Hattiesburg, and I felt Mississippi in general, was really, especially being a reporter covering it, is that you really got an inside look at kind of how local politics work, kind of how small town communities operate, how, for lack of a better word, incestuous things can be. And so it's kind of interesting to kind of like explore it. And I learned a lot of things that at the time I didn't know would influence my writing.
Oh, wow. Like what?
Just, like I met, I really got a front row seat to crime and how police do their jobs and the issues within police departments. One of the things, and this even translated into my current job, because I then left Hattiesburg and I worked for a newspaper for another 5 years in Baton Rouge, Mississippi, which is a larger newspaper. And I covered light crime before I went to heavy politics as well. And during my time, I always met like a lot of police officers when I was covering crime. During downtime, when you're waiting for information, a lot of times they had very honest and real conversations with me. And when I'm talking about a lot of the Black police officers. And that's how I really learned a lot of things that influenced Duchess's story and the story of Duchess's father, who was one of the only Black police officers in The Black Queen, in the town that this was set in. And a lot of times those conversations, they were unexpected because they told me things that I never thought about as a regular citizen and the challenges that a Black police officer may face working for, a police force. One, if they're one of the only, or two, just like a lot of the issues and problems that were in the system that almost felt like insurmountable to them. And what was really interesting, one of the most eye-opening conversations that I had was when I was living, covering crime in Louisiana. And I was talking to a couple of police officers. This was during the time when like the Trayvon Martin death happened. You started to really start having these police reform protests and this movement starting to happen. And he was telling me that like, my chief, my boss, my supervisor, they like watch my children's social media to make sure they aren't posting anything against police officers. And he's like, I know they're not doing it to my white counterparts. Like, why are my children being signaled out? And then another caveat was like some of the pushback that a lot of Black police officers told me they got from like the Black community for being police officers. That was very eye-opening to me. I never even thought about that. And so, at that time, I would just collect these stories. These were things that they told me off the record. I could never use them in reporting. I think they felt that they could share these things with me because a lot of times I was the only Black face on my newspaper staff, and so they felt that camaraderie. But I saved all this information. And when I started to turn back to fiction writing again, and I started to draft out, the Black Queen, I thought about that and I said, wow, this could really be some interesting discussion. This could spark some interesting discussions if I kind of use some of the things that they told me in this fictional character that I wanted to create.
Yeah, no, so it sounds almost like these books are kind of like an outlet for these things that you couldn't report on that were still, like keeping you up at night.
Very much so. I think that, a lot of times fiction writing for me is a way for me to express myself in a way that I can't express myself as a journalist. One of there aren't a lot of journalists of color. And one of the reasons that is because being in media, mainstream media, it is very mentally exhausting for journalists of color because oftentimes we have to talk to, show people respect that we know don't have respect for us. And that's even in politics, especially, and you have to sit there and give a legitimate voice to someone that is actively trying to undermine and take rights away from you and who you are. It's hard to do sometimes, and even so, I remember during the times when the police reform protests really sparked a national debate. And my newspaper had a huge, of course it was during COVID, so we had this Zoom, all company wide conference or meeting, and the whole discussion was about what we couldn't say on Twitter. You can't say this, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I remember in that meeting, I raised my hand, and I just was so beaten down at that time, and I was like, I don't think that you guys would have an issue with us going on Twitter and saying we detest child predators, which they wouldn't. But you mean to tell me that I can't get on social media and say that I detest racism, that I detest systemic racism? That's what you're telling me. So then what are you telling me about me and my worth as a person? To think that a journalist of color isn't going to go into certain things having certain bias is unrealistic. And I say one of the things that I feel mainstream media does not explore, or we do not have a reckoning on, is the fact that a lot of the guidelines and principles that guide mainstream media, like you can't talk about this, you can't do this, you can't do that, you have to get the other side. Have we ever had a discussion that said a lot of that is steeped in white supremacy or is an extension of it? I mean, newsrooms were predominantly white and straight and male, and
Yeah.
still kind of are. And so we're not having that discussion about why some of these principles we follow, what do they stem from? And so it's really, becoming especially my writing lately, turning to fiction was a way for me, like you said, to really address topics, explore things that I could never explore as a journalist because mainstream media doesn't want me to.
Yeah, bringing up, like that period when during COVID, when there was a lot of, Black Lives Matter and, like race issues really came up kind of at that same time. I remember hearing that some reporters who belong to those communities were not allowed to cover those topics in some
Right,
places.
right.
And thinking about the Black Queen. So, the backstory of the Black Queen is about how there's this actually like kind of like racial undertone when it comes to homecoming and prom in the South. And
Mm-hmm.
so, for example, a friend of mine is from like closer to the Delta. And there was this huge national story that came out when a public school in the Delta was still having a public prom and a private prom that were effectively racially segregated proms.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we have all kind of shared, like in my friend group, our stories of high school growing up. So I grew up in a town that's very close to the fictional town in this book. I grew up in Bay St.
Wow.
Louis.
Okay.
Yeah. And our school was like fairly well integrated, and we had a homecoming court where, like everybody competed. But a friend of mine went to a school in North Mississippi where there was a white homecoming court and a Black homecoming court. And
Yes.
they thought this indicated racial progress. And she was telling me the story about the thing that kind of unraveled it was a very popular girl when she was in school was Hispanic, and they didn't know which
Uh,
homecoming court to put her on. And
wow.
then they were like, oh, wait, why do
Yeah.
we do this?
Yes. Yeah. Well,
So,
let's
yeah,
take this a little further. My idea for the Black Queen came from an actual situation. So
yeah,
this was when I was working at a newspaper. I don't work for the newspaper in Louisiana anymore, but I had a coworker. We were having coffee one day during the workday. We had kind of met up at a coffee shop to work, and I think she was talking. I never can remember, but I think she was talking about her high school 10-year reunion. And during that conversation, she mentions like, "Oh yeah, this girl has a plan. That everyone hates her because like during her senior year, she got all up in arms because she couldn't be homecoming queen because it was a year for a Black girl to be homecoming queen." And so, like she was really upset about it. She was so popular. And, if it wasn't for this like whole like initiative we have, she would have been homecoming queen. And then she goes, so anyway, we have to do this. And I was like, wait. I said, what do you mean? You guys had a Black homecoming queen and a white homecoming queen. She was like, oh yeah, that's what we did. Like we kind of alternated, we wanted to have like progress or whatever, whatever, whatever. And then we just moved on from the conversation. And that stayed with me because I was like, that's such a Southern thing to think that this is how we fix like racism, is to then bring about this convoluted system that I don't know if it really is racial progress. I think we're putting a band-aid on the issue and not really addressing the issue.
yeah. And you're still gonna make people mad, whatever you
Yeah,
do. But,
whatever you
I
do.
guess to kind of go back to that point, from when you're talking about like who gets to cover what stories, that story could be told very differently from the perspective of a white reporter versus a Black reporter, or
For
even
sure.
a Southern reporter versus a Northern reporter.
For sure. And for sure. Because you're gonna know which questions to ask. You're gonna know which things are important. And it's not a white reporter. It's not the fault of a white reporter not to know how to accurately cover my marginalized voices. I mean, we live in a country that doesn't uplift marginalized voices in a way that makes white people care that they should read those stories. I mean, we see it all the time in publishing. I mean, it's just a systemic issue within a lot of facets of our world. Uh, so you need those marginalized voices. They're going to bring a certain sensibility, and let's not say even marginalized. Let's say even I saw it. I felt the same way when the abortion rights issue popped back up. And you had men in newsrooms trying to govern how this should be governed. This is an issue. No, you do not have the autonomy to write about this. You don't have the same sensibility that a female would have approaching this subject. And a lot of it in the newsroom that I was in at the time was, okay, well, now that this has already been changed, let's go find some women and see what they're going to do. You should have been having those discussions before this happened, because you knew it was coming down the pipeline, but we didn't. Because at the time, you didn't think that was an important issue. Because at the end of the day, a white straight man, no matter what happens politically, as a white straight man, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And
And they're
it
the
doesn't
ones
matter
who's
what happens.
deciding what's on the front page, what's above the
Exactly.
fold, what
Exactly.
even makes
Exactly.
it into the newspaper to begin with.
And how it's covered. And so yeah, it can be very mentally draining for marginalized and BIPOC people to work in mainstream media, and that's why there aren't a lot of them. But people don't want to have that conversation because mainstream media is filled with a lot of white people who are on the right side of history on a lot of things, so they feel they can't be racist, and it's hard to have those discussions there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. So there's also, on this note, there's a lot to unpack with the new book, with Wander in the Dark. So
I know it never gets light. It never gets light,
I
does
know.
it?
I know. Are you ever going to write some kind of like fluffy rom-com or something?
Oh, who
Just
knows?
kidding.
Listen, I know, right? I could though, because it's like, the thing about it is, I know that I don't want to write about Black trauma all the time because I have to live in it for so long writing these books. I mean, it takes a year to produce a book, and it's like I don't want to live in this all the time. However, I do think these are important conversations to have. And Wander in the Dark was really the book I really wanted to write before The Black Queen. It is the book of my heart. It's so personal.
Oh, so I wanted to ask, so there are two, brothers who are the main characters in this book, Amir and Marcel. Is there one or the other who you connect with more, or is there a little bit of you in both of them?
A little bit of me in both. Marcel is a queer Black kid that I wish I was or could have been in high school at his age. That's who I wish I could be. And Amir has a lot of fragments of the anger and the frustrations that I used to have with my father growing up. And so I kind of split myself into two and put pieces of me in both of them. But of course, what makes it fiction is, because I was a queer kid, I had a very tense relationship with my father growing up, and it wasn't always the best. Um, but we have a great relationship now, and we got to a great place, and it's wonderful. And he's one of the most supportive dad any kid could ever ask for. And but I wanted to give Marcel a father who was already accepting, and that's more of a reflection of the world today. It's just so like my niece. I was saying the other day, my 19-year-old niece. They have a lot of gay kids. Like some of the kids, the gay guys in their school went to prom with their boyfriends. I was like, what? This is unheard of. This is like a whole different day. So I wanted to reflect that, okay, well, Amir's father maybe wouldn't have this hang up. Their father wouldn't have this hang up. However, we can, explore some of the issues I have with my father through Amir. And also, my parents divorced when I was young as well. It wasn't the exact same setup, but I was a child of a divorced family as well. And I figured that would resonate not only with Black, I feel like, in this day and age, a lot of kids across a lot of different cultural backgrounds have experienced the family dynamic that these brothers have,
Yeah, I also come from a divorced parents, and there's also the whole dynamic when they get remarried. And that
Yes.
was, I thought, really interesting how you explored the relationship between the stepmom and the mom in the book.
Yes. I mean, listen, the thing with Wonder in the Dark is the family drama I felt was so good as well that sometimes it kind of pales in comparison to what's happening with the mystery. I had to really try to find a good balance between both of them.
Well, and then you also have not only Amir and Marcel's family, but you've got one of their friends at their high school, and I'm pretty sure I know which high school this is based on, but I don't want to say it out loud in case it gets picked up or something. But like one of their kids in their friend circle is the son of a congressman.
Yes.
And there's a whole thing where like he literally stopped seeing his girlfriend because his girlfriend's dad got caught up in a scandal, and he was like, I can't be seen with you.
Yes. Look, listen, this is, let's say this. Let's go back for a second and talk about kind of that character's name is Trey. And the whole dynamic behind Wonder in the Dark came from a question that I had around privilege and whether or not Black people who are upper class, share the same privileges that a white person, upper class person will have. And going into writing this book, my thought was, well, yes, they can, but with conditions. And I saw some of this happen with the whole Will Smith Oscar slap. And you have an individual, a man who had, he's upper class, had a stellar career going forward. People loved him. He was loved by everyone. And he makes one mistake, and then the media and everyone wants to tear him down. And there's all these debates. He made one mistake, but let's stay in Hollywood. I can point to a lot of other people, Mel Gibson, Woody Allen, all these white men who have done deplorable things, and they still have careers. No one's challenging whether or not they should have a career. They just still have their career. And so I kind of wanted to explore that. And what happens is with a lot of Black upper class and upperly mobile families, you feel this immense pressure to be perfect. Because if you're not perfect, then you're going to lose everything that you got. And so a lot of the debate in this, you have these two Black families in this book that are navigating the same issue, but are navigating it very differently. And that is the Trudeaus, which our brothers belong to, and then you have Trey and the Winslows and their family and how they're trying to navigate it.
I know I have so much to say about this, but one thing that really jumps out at me is so I just went to the Legacy Museum in Montgomery and the Lynching Memorial there, and those sites were created by Brian Stevenson, who is a really well-known attorney who has represented a lot of people. But what is so interesting about his approach to the cases he takes on is he doesn't just take on people who are wrongfully convicted, even though he does do a lot of that. He's like, if we only look at the people who are wrongfully convicted, we hold up this like ideal of perfection that like you
Mm-hmm.
have to have been perfect before this
Yes.
happened to be
Yes.
exonerated. And he
Yes.
had this quote on a t-shirt that was in the gift shop that said, "You are more than the sum of the worst thing you've ever done," something like
Right.
that. And
Yes.
so, and I feel like there's also like two ways to interpret that quote, because you can say that for like people who have paid their debt to society, but you can also, like, as a white person, when I saw that shirt, I was like, I've, said and done things that I now regret. And it's like,
Yeah.
I hope that people realize that that doesn't reflect the sum total of myself either.
Exactly. Exactly.
But going back to, so you brought up the Hollywood experience, or the
Yes.
Hollywood examples of Will Smith versus like a Mel Gibson. And what I couldn't help but think about when I was reading this book is the Brock Turner case at
Mm.
Stanford, where he
Mm-hmm.
and he raped a woman on campus. He was a student at the time. She was a student. Her name is Chantel Miller. She ended up writing a memoir about it. But during the whole case, they kept saying, "Well, this is a blip. He's not really like this. He's such a good boy,"
Oh,
um, and no one gives Black kids that benefit of the doubt.
no.
And
No.
so as I was reading, about Amir. So in a nutshell, Amir is accused of killing a girl from their high school class who is white and who is rich.
Yeah.
And he has had one previous run-in with the law where he was wrong place at the wrong time. In both of these
Right.
cases, wrong
Yeah.
place at the wrong time. But because he had already gotten that one ding on his record, they were like, "Well, of course you did this. You obviously did
Yeah.
this."
Exactly.
And it
Yeah.
didn't matter if he really did or not.
No. And then look at the ramifications it had for his family. And then it's all, well, now let's look at his family now. His dad probably, this is probably because his dad didn't raise him right. His dad's not in his life. It's then tearing down everything that his father had built as well. It's like, let's call
Yes.
all of this into question.
And, like one thing that like really shook me up was, when they set his bail, it was $1 million and they said it's because your dad has money and we're afraid he's going to use it to help you get out of here. But I mean, I'm like, that seems a bit excessive, like,
I know. I
and
know.
would you do the same thing if this were a white 17-year-old?
Exactly. We give them so, look at all the times there's a school shooting. And like clockwork, and I say most times the school shootings mostly are perpetrated by white straight men. And all the time, like clockwork, well, he had mental issues. He was going through a lot. He was doing this. Let's say this, even if that may be the case, sometimes mainstream media needs to stop pulling that thread and going with it. And we need to acknowledge what's really happening here. You're trying to scapegoat it. But then we have a person like a Trayvon Martin who was walking with a hoodie on that was trying to get some Skittles and buy something to drink at a corner store. And because he posts gang signs one time on his Facebook profile, somehow he deserved what he got. Maybe he should have just complied. Like it's so insane and it's so right in your face, black and white, for lack of a better word. It's right there, and people still want to deny it, or people still want to defend and give certain people allowances and grace. And us, especially as black boys, or even just people in marginalized communities all the time, we're expected to just smile and just get through it and just and have forgiveness and rise above it. You should just rise above all of that. Why should we rise above it and they're allowed grace?
And God forbid you show anger or frustration.
God forbid. Then it's a whole issue. Yeah, it's a whole issue. And so, yeah, with this book was really, with the Black Queen, it was definitely more of a female perspective, and I was juggling the female perspective of a Black queer girl and a white privileged girl. And then with this book, it was definitely black boys front and center. It was really just all about that. And even with Marcel was a kid, unlike, and kind of said this up for listeners. So we can explain the family dynamic, because we're just talking like they read the book as well. But
I
so
mean, you should
basically,
have.
I know, right, right. So basically, Amir's the older child. So their father was married to Amir's mother first. He had an affair with Marcel's mother. They got a divorce, obviously, and then he had Marcel. He married Marcel's mother then, and right when that happened, he also hit it big. He was a restaurateur. He was struggling with Amir's mother, but then with Marcel's mother, he gained success. He became like an Emerald Lagasse kind of
Yeah,
local
I love
celebrity
that you
chef.
make him a celebrity chef.
Yeah, he's like a
And
celebrity
that's so
chef. He has
New
her.
Orleans too. I
It's
mean, it's
so
just
New
like,
Orleans.
yeah.
Yeah. And so Marcel grew up in privilege. He grew up going to school with white kids, and he felt that, you know, they they rub noses with some of the most powerful people in the city, and I don't have to deal with racism really. I'm just like them. And then something happens in the book, and what happens to his brother makes him realize, oh, they don't think of me like as one of them. They are ready to throw me away. These people who I thought were my friends, they're not really my friends. And it was something that, you know, the victim and him were having an argument about before the story started. She was trying to tell him, these kids are not your friends, you know?
So, okay, this leads me to I would love for you to talk about, I'll let you get a glass of water real quick, but the title of the book. So, this comes up about like a third of the way through the book. Brothers don't let each other wander in the dark alone. So, can you talk about that? What that
It's
means?
it's yeah, it's a quote that I came across. I think when I was researching the Black Queen, or I read so much stuff I can't even remember. I was researching or reading something else, and I came across this quote, and it kind of just stuck with me. I felt it was very, very profound. Where, for me, I interpreted it as being, it doesn't matter what you're going through with your brother. It doesn't matter, and this could be a friendship or whatever. It doesn't matter what's happening. When times are dark, you band together, you pull together, and you help each other out of that darkness. That's how I interpreted it. And so I kind of let that be the guiding principle of how I kind of outlined the novel when I knew I wanted to explore this with two brothers. And kind of, they are estranged. Amir and Marcel do not have the best relationship at the start of this. Of course, Amir has a lot of anger towards his father, and he also has some anger towards his brother, who wasn't always the nicest to him growing up. And so they shared a grandmother who, loved them both. They had a love for her, and she has passed away at the beginning of the novel. But on her deathbed, she asks Marcel, "You need to fix things with your brother." And Marcel is a type of person, Marcel is rich and entitled, but he's not like a pretentious rich person. Well, he is a little pretentious, but he's one of those pretentious. He he's one of those pretentious where he wants everything to be perfect. He wants his family to have this. He's not like a spoiled brat in the sense of I want everything my way. He wants everything in his life to be great, and so he goes out of his way to make that happen and to honor his grandmother's wishes and try to be there for his brother. He knows instantly that his brother could not be guilty of this crime. Without trying to give away too many spoilers, there's something that he knows about his brother that he knows my brother could not have done this. And so from there, you have Amir who's still very angry, and you have Marcel who's trying to show him, hey, dude, I love you. I know it's all messed up. That we have this messed up family history, but I'm trying to be here for you. Let me be here for you. Let me show you that I can be a good brother to you. And a lot of the story is Amir trying to realize, do I even want to deal with this? I think Amir, because of how, Amir sees his father going on, living his life with this new family as rejection of him. And a lot of kids, I felt that way as well. Like, why am I not enough? It doesn't matter that you remarried or you have a new family or you and my mom didn't work out. You should suck it up and you should be there for me. I don't care how difficult my mom is. You be there for me because I didn't ask to be in this world. You brought me here. I am your responsibility, and you should show up for me no matter how hard it is. And when parents don't do that for kids, a lot of times kids take that as rejection. What's wrong with me? Do I not deserve anything? And because of that, Amir has this view of the world of, well, nothing's going to go right for me. My own dad doesn't want to be in my life. So my life is messed up. So why should I care about anything? And so Barcel is going against that and trying to show him, dude, I'm going to be here for you. I don't care what dad has done. I want to be here for you. Let me be here for you. And so a lot of the story is trying to figure out, can they find a way to love each other out of their whole messy drama, family drama?
Yeah, well, so Marcel's trying so hard to rebuild trust with his brother and, and is like kind of begging, like, let me be here for you. Do you think Amir would have been as receptive if he weren't like in the lowest point of his life?
Maybe, that is such a good question, Emily. I don't really know. I think that the way Amir, I'm gonna say this. I think that there's part of Amir, maybe he would have been in a way, because the thing about it is Amir still showed up to his brother's party. Even when him and his brother were on the best of terms, there's something that happens in the beginning of the book where another student kind of comes at his brother, and Amir immediately jumps in. Do not touch my brother. He's still very protective of Marcel. It's kind of like rag on you, but no one else can. Because he still has this good heart. He still has this protective heart over his brother in a way. So I think that maybe they still could have gotten into a good place, but him having to be at his lowest point really opened the door for them to have the tough conversation they needed to have.
Yeah. So, okay. Oh, I have so much to talk about, but one thing, this kind of goes back to, I guess, like the fact that you were a journalist in the past, and there's a lot of things in the book that feel like ripped from the headlines. And one of the things that I also couldn't help like keep thinking about is so one of the high school friend, the girl who was murdered, her dad is this prominent architect, and you tie this backstory to the real life situation where there was a building collapse when a hotel was under construction in New Orleans. And I like was Googling it just to like jog my memory for before our conversation. And I saw that there was actually just a grand jury decided not to indict the company on like criminal charges. And 3 people died in that situation.
Yes, I know.
So, I can't help but like look at your book and be like, okay, so this one individual is, you could maybe argue, indirectly responsible for the deaths of, multiple people through
Right.
through negligence at his business.
Right.
And we're looking at Amir, who didn't actually commit this crime,
No.
but everyone's looking at him like you are as guilty as the day is long.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I think there's even a scene where there's a scene where Marcel observes when they go to that family, and the family's kind of rejecting them because they suspect that Amir killed their daughter. And he's like, when you were in trouble, our family was sitting here eating dinner with you, supporting you, my dad supporting you, and then you just immediately think the worst of my brother. And you know us, though. You know us. You know that. Maybe he doesn't know more. He doesn't know Amir, because Amir, even though they go to the same school, Amir doesn't really deal with his brother. Like, he's kind of like, he feels like an outsider at this school. And so, yeah, it's so weird how certain, like you said, we back to the conversation of certain people being allowed grace and the opportunity to make mistakes, and other people, they're not allowed that same grace, and kind of what that does to a person in that situation.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm frantically looking for this one quote from Marcel's mom that just like really stuck with me. And it's
Okay.
during that scene when they're
Okay.
at Chloe's the girl who's been murdered. They're at her
Yes.
family's house for the
Yes.
memorial. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Okay. I gotta find it.
You go right ahead.
I'm trying to remember which page it's on. No, it's not this far. Well, okay. Let me see what I can find. Well, anyway, so I guess I'll just paraphrase it. But she basically, his mom is like, trying to be like, she's walking on eggshells around the girl's family, and the family is just convinced that Marcel's brother Amir did this because there's some video footage of him leaving their house at that same time.
Right.
And Marcel wants to jump up to defend his brother. And the mom kind of like shushes him. And he's like so mad about this, right? Oh, I found it.
Okay.
And so here's how she explains it. She said, I didn't want you defending your brother. This isn't the time or place for that. Those poor people have lost their daughter in the most unspeakable way. If it had been you, if the roles were reversed, the truth wouldn't matter to me either. They want justice. They're angry. And right now, your brother is the only answer they've got. Don't hate them for wanting to latch on to that. That blew my mind. That was like one of those like throw the book across the room moments. But it's so true though, because it's like
Yeah,
when you are in pain, like you are just trying to find a place to project it, right?
exactly. And you're not being rational.
Yeah.
The grief is so hard. And I think that, like his mother said, listen, I understand that you're angry. I know you want to protect your brother, but these people lost a daughter, a young daughter. That is so hard. And I think that, I've had to write a lot about parents who've lost their children to violence. And it is the most soul crushing thing that I have ever had to report on. It's like, because parents don't grow up thinking, I'm going to bury my children, especially
Yeah.
young children. And so, yeah, a lot of things aren't rational. And I think that a lot of times you do have to tell, because teenagers can be they're just emotions. Everything is like a knee jerk reaction. And sometimes you have to be a good person to tell a teenager, listen, I understand how you feel, but understand that there are a lot more nuances to this. You're not a parent yet. You can't fathom what that is like. So give them a little grace. Don't do it right now. This is
Yeah.
not the moment or the time.
Yeah. I mean, that was
And I
what.
want, and I wanted, and I want to say, I didn't want, because the thing about it, that was a very controversial statement for me, right? Because as the readers will see, his mother isn't that nice to Amir. She doesn't like the mom. Of course, they have a fraught history. And so she kind of, you know, has not been very kind to Amir and hasn't been very encouraging of Marcel's relationship with him. And so, Marcel knows that and takes that in as, you just don't want me to defend my brother because you don't like him. But she had to have that moment to go, because I wanted to show that it's not that she doesn't have a heart. Listen, Marcel, I get it, but you have to understand there's a lot more to this. Being an adult, there's a lot more layers to this, and you have to understand when and how to express yourself, and to who and when. That was really the important thing, because I think that this is for young adults, and I think it's very important to teach young people how to be better adults through
So
these kind of stories.
speaking of that, so like, why do you write for young adult? Like, is that just an
I've
escape for
always
you, or?
I've always been drawn to young adult stories ever since I was growing up. I've just always, even as, TV, I like to watch. I think it's a really interesting time in a person's life where you really start to like see the world and figure it out for what it is. And it's just highly emotional. Teenagers are so emotional. But at the same time, too, this stems from me being a teenager and not having books that featured kids that look like me in them. I grew up, I love Nancy Drew. I love the Hardy Boys. I used to read this book called Encyclopedia Brown. I loved them. But I always wanted, where are the books like that for the kids like me? Why can't I see Black kids who are like the quote unquote smartest kids in the room and they can figure things out, you know? And so that's why I really wanted to turn back to young adult books and to really give this new generation of children these characters that they can see themselves, bringing justice, bringing down oppressive systems, challenging oppressive systems, rather, and seeking justice for their communities. Because let's be honest, the criminal justice system in our country affects brown and Black people very differently than it affects white people. So we should have a lot more marginalized voices in this genre, and we just don't, adult wise or young adult wise. And so I really wanted to add that voice, and it's very important for me. That's not to say I won't write adult one day. I very well could, but for right now, I really want to write the stories that I was so desperately wanting as a teenager, wanting to have for myself, and just to see myself reflected in it. Because so many other kids, like I grew up in a very middle class family. My mom, all my aunts and uncles, they were college educated. I knew I was going, but every kid doesn't have that. I could look to my family for role models to look up to, but I also wanted to see them in literature. I always wanted to see them in mainstream media. And, so often Black children and our marginalized children, period, here, you could be anything you want in this country. You just got to work hard. But it's very hard for a marginalized kid when they look out into the world and they don't see themselves reflected in everything. If they only see themselves reflected in sports and music, well, I'm not any of those things. What does that leave me? It's so important that they see themselves in, and we're starting to see this kind of crumble, but we're nowhere near where we should be. When I mean everything, I mean, I mean teachers in their own life. There's so many students and school systems that I covered where there were hardly any black male teachers, hardly any black teachers. You had a whole bunch of black kids. They don't even have role models to look up to there.
Yeah.
They need to really see that in order to dream and to dream bigger, because some kids do need that. And so I'm trying to, in my own way, you know, give them that. But at the same time, I also want to have books in the world that white kids can read and really understand the nuances of race and really walk in someone else's shoes, and not have to rely on their black friend to teach them these things. These are things that they can see and learn for themselves and really learn how to be a better person for the next couple of decades. Hopefully, let's keep our fingers crossed. We don't want to be having these same conversations, you know?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I think is really cool, hearing you talk about your approach to young adult is that kids can have power, in to change the
We
the
see
world
it.
that they live in.
We
Like if
see
you
it.
think the way that homecoming works at your school is messed up, you can change that. Or like, if you see
Yes,
someone who's been wrongfully accused of something and that, something that can help that person in their
you can
situation,
do
like
it.
you can, like Marcel and Amir,
We've
you can
seen them
change it.
do it. We can
My
see them.
favorite example is, here in Mississippi, the reason why the state flag changed was, to
Yes,
me, one of the watershed moments was this big rally in Jackson, and it was organized by a group of like 8 or 10, like high school, college
yes.
age Black kids.
I remember this.
Yeah. They are literally like the biggest reason why the state flag like went like the
Yes,
momentum, happened.
yes. And they can
So
do
yeah.
they have so much power. Young people, and the thing about it is I think it's a really good time in life because young people have less to lose than adults do. Because oftentimes adults they can lose their jobs, the means to take care of their family. They have children themselves they're trying to protect. And a lot of times, unfortunately, we become adults and we get responsibilities and we start realizing, oh, we have too much to lose. I can't enter this fight. I have these restraints. But young people don't have the same restraints. They want to tear down the world. They want to tear down, and and I love it. I love that passion. I heard some people sometimes like this new generation. They're just so entitled. They feel that they got to have da da da. I know what they're saying, and in some ways, yeah, but in some ways, I kind of like that they're like that. I like that they are more willing to say, "We're not accepting this. This isn't good enough for us.
Mhm.
You need to change." And I love it. I love that they want to unapologetically challenge a systems. And I love seeing it. And so it really warms my heart every time I see a story like that. And even to know that some of these kids are having been just Black kids. There have been white kids who have used their voice, used their privilege to help their marginalized friends. Have been for like, we're not accepting this. I love it. And I think that's why you see this movement now to let's take these books out of schools, because the right and these staunch conservatives, they don't want that. They want white kids to be like, no, 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 no. We don't want you to be that woke. They kind of co-opt that word and made it negative. We don't want you to understand the world. We want you to still live in these silos, these bubbles where you think you should matter and you're the center of things. Don't worry about those people. That's what we're seeing happening. That's what we're seeing. And it's very scary in a way, because there are pockets, especially in the South, where they're winning. They're winning. And it's still an issue. And we're still very, very behind. And we still have a lot of work to do, you know?
Yeah. Yes. All of that.
You said this is going to be fun. We've talked about all this heavy stuff.
I know. Okay. So let me get to the fun part. Okay. I'm going to do like a little lightning round of my fun questions. Okay.
Let's
And
do
we'll
it.
just kind of like hit them like, real quick. So, what is your favorite Mardi Gras parade?
Probably Endymion.
Me too. Okay. I was going to say Endymion or Bacchus.
Endymion, I love the nighttime parade. They have the best throws. And it's one of those things that like it's a tradition which among me and my friends. We go, we have a tailgate. People don't we like to have a whole block party that day, and it's just a whole thing. And so I definitely love it. I'm just praying that, Mardi Gras is early this year. I hope we don't have cold
It's
Mardi Gras.
so early this year.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Like by the time your book actually comes out like perfectly, because the book comes out
I know.
January 30th, and then Mardi Gras is like a week and a half
Bam.
later.
I could have timed this more perfectly if I did it intentionally.
I know, it's great. Yeah, because I mean, so for those who haven't read the book yet, the book literally starts on Mardi Gras Day.
Yeah.
But if you know, you know, Mardi Gras Day is like not necessarily the day that like, I mean, I always go the weekend before. I don't want to like give up my
Yeah.
secrets, but the weekend
Same. Same.
before is where it's
Same.
at.
Let me tell you a funny story. It was really funny when I was doing copy edits of Wander in the Dark. And my editors and then the copy editors would be like, why do they keep saying Mardi Gras Day? Like, isn't it Mardi Gras season? I was like, listen, guys, I understand that, but when we say Mardi Gras Day, we're talking about Fat Tuesday. We don't, and we
Yes, like
wouldn't say Fat
the
Tuesday.
day.
We say Mardi Gras Day. That's what we say, and
Yes,
everyone knows
it's so
Fat
true.
Tuesday.
That's how you differentiate Mardi Gras Day versus Mardi Gras the season.
Season, exactly. It is so funny because they don't understand. They're in the East Coast. Like, this doesn't make sense. Trust me, guys. This is a local thing. These kids are from New Orleans. They say Mardi Gras Day.
Yeah. Oh, another New Orleans thing I loved was the Big Frida shout out in here.
That's what they would be listening to. Like,
Oh,
Big Frida is
100%.
yeah. Listen. This is how it's so funny. I was at a book signing this year for another author who wrote her book that was set in New Orleans, and they were talking about how like these writers would like to set their books in New Orleans, and they're always like when they're talking about New Orleans, like I walked outside and I smell magnolia, and we're like, what New Orleans are you talking about? This is not New Orleans. Like, this
No,
is
it
not
smells like stale beer.
exactly, and like sewage and hot garbage and like vomit. Like, no, or the fact that people are like, after they came up doing this book, it's like, well, would they ever go on Bourbon Street? And I'm like, honey, the locals don't go on Bourbon Street. That's
Mm-mm.
it. The only time we go on Bourbon Street is if we're taking a guest someone who's visiting to Bourbon Street.
Or you're
If
going
anything,
to the
we go
gay
to
side.
exactly. We'd go to Frenchman Street, if anything. But the
Yeah.
locals go to. They do not. We avoid. I avoid Bourbon Street at all
Oh,
costs.
like the
Like,
plague. Absolutely.
yeah, I know. I can always tell
The
when a person
last place you will find a local is on Bourbon Street on Mardi Gras Day.
exactly the last. That's actually where they avoid. Like, there's so many other people don't realize there's so many other like neighborhoods. That's the great thing about Mardi Gras. You can just walk in a neighborhood, you just stumble into a parade.
Oh, yeah.
You stumble into a block party.
Unless you're
It's like
trying to get somewhere and you can't get
right,
around the parade route. But
right.
and we have
Yeah, no,
Mardi
it's
Gras
true.
too. Like in where I grew up, we have, Mardi Gras. And I'm sure Baton Rouge has big Mardi
We
Gras
do.
too.
We do. Yeah.
Okay, so here's my other my burning question. So
Okay, here we
there's
go.
this there's this one scene where Amir is like cooking up a storm because he's super stressed out, and he's making this like big, just like doing it up, like everything on the table. So he's doing shrimp and grits, red beans and rice, and gumbo.
Yes.
Which one is your favorite, and which one's got to go?
Red beans and rice is my favorite, and actually shrimp and grits and gumbo has to go. I don't eat seafood, so I'm a person of the South who does not
What?
eat seafood. No, I don't eat seafood. I don't like sweet tea. I
I don't
am
like
like,
C-Tweet
I'm just
either, so we got that.
yeah, yeah. I do not eat seafood, so I'm honestly like in the wrong geographical location to live because everything is all about the seafood here. And I'm just like, nope, don't like it.
Now, do you do like chicken and sausage gumbo?
I would do that. Yeah. So like even with my family, like for the holidays, they'll always, everyone cooks gumbo. They'll cook me like a separate pot with just like the chicken and
Yeah,
sausage, and everybody else
yeah.
has the seafood. Yeah.
I am that same way, but with olives. Like what? So like locals, we always eat gumbo with potato salad, and my
Yes.
mom always
Yes.
puts olives in her potato salad, and she makes a separate one for me without the
Yes.
olives.
Without the olives. Yeah. Yeah. There's some things in the South that we just do. And I love like writing. You would notice that even with the Black Queen, I always have like a dinner scene because, with the South and even with white families, it's very true. Food really is a love language here. It's really something that we do as a family. We gather around, everyone's eating, we have cookouts, we have crawfish boils. That's just a way of culture here. And so oftentimes I always have a dinner scene in a book that's set in the South because that really is something that we do. We love to eat and we love to cook. And so, yeah, I think even with Tinsley's family, I think, what were they eating? I think they were eating like stuff. So it was very like bougie and white, but it was still like very southern. I think it was like crawfish etouffee or something like that.
Now, do you cook?
I cannot cook at all. I'm more Tom Ford, not Tom Colicchio. No, no,
Yeah,
I do not know how to cook at all.
everybody in my family, like they're all amazing cooks, and we have like restaurants in my family and everything. And I
Oh
did not
yeah,
get the cooking gene. It just
at
skipped right
all.
over me.
For me it was one of the. I mean, let me say, I can if I want. I can follow a recipe and I could do it. I think for me, I was raised with my mom, and I had a sister, and so my mom cooked or my sister cooked. I never really had to cook. I never really had to learn. I'm in my family. The women really like to cook. The men don't really cook that much. They just kind of like grill, and that's kind of the way they like it. And so I just never really. There was never this movement to like, hey, we need to try to cook. And I never was the person to go, come teach me how to cook. I was kind of like, okay, these people know how to do this. And then when I got on my own, I was like, well, I can go buy like I have a meal prep service that I use because I don't like to eat like a lot of fast food or processed food. If I can buy a service to get food, that's what I'll do. So yeah, I don't know. I'm in trouble if I ever meet a spouse and they're like, "Can you cook?" No.
Hope you can.
Hope you can.
So, okay, I have a theory that, okay, in the book, Amir
hmm
and Marcel's dad, the celebrity chef,
Okay.
my
hmm
theory is that grandma taught him how to
hmm
cook.
Yes, I think this is discussed. This is discussed in the book. So in the book, I think Amir talks about it. So yes, their nana taught Amir's father Martin how to cook because she said she wasn't raising a son that depended on a woman to know how to cook. So she raised him how to cook, and he became very very good at it. And she also taught Amir how to cook. And she would have taught Marcel, but Marcel was just horrible in the kitchen. So she was like, "No, you just don't worry about cooking." But Amir had a natural talent for it, and it's also something that he hides from his father because he doesn't. It's one of those things. It's really interesting with Amir because I did this with my dad as well, and I know a lot of my friends who had from divorced parents. They say the same thing: is that you are very angry with your parent, but at the same time, you also want that connection at the same time. You gotta have both happening at the same time, and so it's one of those things that you know he knows that if his dad found that out, he would be very, very proud of him. And there's even, I think there's a scene toward the end where he has an opportunity to cook for his dad. And in his mind, he just thinks that, oh, I kind of want to make him proud, even though you're angry. You can be angry. And I think I really want young people to have this discussion really with parents. I hope parents and young people read this book because I think there's something to learn from both. 'Cause I think oftentimes, parents also have to realize that sometimes all your kid needs you to do is just to show up. You don't have to have the right answer. They just want you to show up, and that's all they need. And a lot of times, I think children need to understand that sometimes parents don't always have the right answers, but they're coming from a place of love. And sometimes maybe you're going to have to meet them halfway.
Yep. That's awesome. And I love it when we have young adult books that we can recommend to parents and kids to read at the same time.
Yeah, so many young adult books. The thing is, let's kill off the parents because we have to figure out why the parents aren't involved. And I don't like both my books. In both of my books, the parents have played such a central role in the story and what was happening to the kids. And I think that's more realistic too. I think that one of the things I was just reading a review, which I shouldn't read, but one person said, "Oh, this book would be good if you just want to suspend the belief that teenagers can solve crime." And it's just like, oh my God, give me a break. Like, they're like, the kids should just go run and tell the parents everything. I was thinking to myself, you think that teenagers go and tell their parents everything? Please. I think so often adults who read young adult expect young adult authors to write teens that they wish their children were instead of who teens actually are.
Well, and I just can't get over this comment like teenagers solving crime is like so unrealistic because like then how is Nancy Drew and like the Hardy Boys like
Exactly. Well, let's talk about that a little bit too. One of the things as a journalist that one of the first things I realized when I covered crime is how often SC, Law and Order, CSI, they have given people this warped sense that one, police always solve crimes, they always get it right, and three, that DNA evidence can crack anything. And what people don't realize, and I've said this at one panel I did, I said, I want you to go back and I want you to review in news how many times DNA evidence solved a crime. And I want you to pinpoint the timeline on when that happened. Oftentimes, it's when it's in trial or it's years later. No one is doing DNA evidence right when a crime happens because most police departments do not have crime labs. In Louisiana, there's only one, the state police. So that means every police department has to send their DNA evidence together to their crime lab. And guess what happens? It gets backed up. There have been countless stories about how rape kits are backed. I think the same as in Mississippi sometimes. It gets backed up. Sometimes some cases get pushed forward if it's like a high profile case. But at the same time, oftentimes DNA evidence comes into play years, months later because it takes that much time to process. And so a lot of times when I was talking to, I had a one cop friend who was a very, very good friend. He passed away before I actually started writing books, which I really wish he wouldn't have. He would have been so proud of everything that I'm doing. But we became really good friends outside of him just being a spokesman for a police department that I covered. And he would always say that a lot of times we solve crimes the good old fashioned way. We go talk to people. We stalk people's social media. We are watching people. We're going through records. We're going through their financial records, things like that. And I was like to myself, these are all things that teenagers can do. This is all things they can do. If
Yeah.
you're a teenager, I think the only thing you have to do is you have to make a teenager care to do it. Most teenagers are like, this does not involve me. I have nothing to do with this. You have to make it why would they want to do it. That's what you
Mhm.
gotta really drive the point home. But they can totally do this. They can totally solve crimes. They have a front row seat to a lot of this stuff. But it was very eye opening to me to realize that, oh, so this is how really police work is done. Well, maybe I can write this in a way that it comes off a little bit realistic for readers. That this is how you can kind of solve a crime. This is how they kind of put pieces together.
Yeah. Well, forget about that review because didn't you also get a starred review from Publishers Weekly? So
I did, yes. And they said smart sleuthing.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. I only mentioned that because I think a lot of times people kind of, who especially read YA adults and they read these books, they don't give. I think I'm just unrealistic. Why would you this is a story. So you're trying to say Angela Lansbury, she's just an author, she can go solve a crime, but a teenager can't. It's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, okay. I have one more question in my lightning round. Well, no, maybe
Let's
two more.
go.
Okay.
Let's go.
So, what are you reading right now? Or what's the last book you read that you'd love to recommend?
Okay, so right now I'm reading two books that are on my nightstand. One is the Britney Spears autobiography.
Yes.
I love every second of it. I'm a very slow reader, but I'm still reading it. But I love Britney Spears. She's one of my favorites. I don't care what she does. I don't care about the
I mean,
crazy.
she is
I
the
don't care.
patron saint of Louisiana. And we claim her too from
Thank you.
Mississippi because she went to
I
high
know.
school in Macomb.
Exactly. She is our Southern girl, and I love her, and I don't care what anybody has to say. So I'm reading her autobiography, which is so good and juicy. And I've been reading this book called The Weight of Blood by Tiffany Jackson, which is everyone has been talking about. It's a companion book to The Black Queen. It's a kind of like a Carrie retelling with a biracial girl as the character. And
Yeah.
I am loving it. It goes into a lot of the whole segregated prom situation as well. I think
Yes.
that's in Alabama, a fictitious town in Alabama. And I am loving it. Loving it.
Yeah, no, I think that's Tiffany Jackson. It would be a great buddy read comparison to this for sure.
Oh, I love her. I met her finally. One of the best things about being an author was kind of getting to finally meet all of these authors that I looked up to and who I kind of feel paved the way for me. And I recently, Tiffany was one of the ones that I was very excited to finally meet. And I kind of had met a whole bunch of her friends before I met her. And I met her in New Orleans actually. And I finally met her and she is just so cool. It's so great when you meet your heroes and they're the coolest, most down to earth people you would ever want to meet in the world. So I was already a fan, but I'm even more of a fan now.
Oh, awesome. Well, so one of my questions was going to be, who are some of your biggest influences? So we talked about Tiffany Jackson. Who else would
Tiffany
you shout out?
Jackson. I would definitely say Angie Thomas, Nick Stone, Karen McManus. Huge. So the four that I just named are honestly the people that kind of set me on the path to write YA, to write The Black Queen, because I kind of written off and on all of my life, and I kind of was feeling the longing again. And I said, well, what does YA look like now? Because when I was in YA, it was very, very vanilla. I used to read Sweet Valley High and like I said, Nancy Drew and things like that. So I went to the bookstore, and I think at the time it was when One of Us's line had just blown up. And I said, oh, let me read this book, And then I was getting that book and I saw Angie Thomas's The Hate You Give. I saw Nick Stone's Dear Martin. And Tiffany's book at the time was Allegedly. And so I bought all of those books and I read them in like a month, which is super fast for me because I don't read that fast. And I thought to myself, okay, I know what I want. I know what space I want to be in. I want to write the kind of book that Karen McManus writes, but that addresses the topics that like Angie Thomas and Nick Stone and Tiffany Jackson does in there. But I want to combine those things. And that's kind of where kind of the birth of my like writing renaissance came from.
I love it. Okay. Well, so continuing on the writing train of thought. So my last question for you, well, I'll give a little backstory into the question. So I thought it was really interesting that you got your book deals through Pitch Wars, which isn't around anymore, but had
No,
been. Yeah, but it was a really cool, like, it was like an
it was.
open competition on
Yes,
Twitter. It was like a public competition to pitch your books to agents and
yes,
editors.
yes.
So what did you learn from that process? Like, what advice would you give to someone who's an aspiring writer?
I think that process really taught me what it was going to be like when I had a publishing deal, how to write on things that a lot of aspiring writers don't understand. Granted, I was kind of ahead of the game here because I am a working journalist. I already knew how to write on deadline, but a lot of people don't. Like a lot of people may spend like a year writing a book or doing revisions on a book. But when it comes time to write on deadline, people are like, how do I do this? Because you didn't have to like program yourself. You have to discipline yourself. I have to write this many words. That's hard for people to do. And Pitch Wars was so great because it gave you that deadline, that crunch time to have to revise a manuscript with feedback from someone that's in the industry. I think that so often aspiring writers, it would benefit you greatly to find a writing group if you can in your area, some kind of writing professor, a writing coach, maybe an English professor, or English teacher, somebody outside of your friend group or your family. I understand you want them to read your book, but I'm telling you right now, don't care what they think. They're not going to give you need someone to give you honest feedback that knows writing, that knows beats, that understands plot structure and how to drive character. You need that input and you need to be open to the input. You can't go into writing with this mindset of, well, if you don't understand it, you just don't get it. And I like it. That's all that matters. You can't do that. You have to go into it knowing that you want, like, I love that. Like, I don't, to be honest with you, I don't even, first of all, my parents don't read anything until it's published for me. I don't even share about that with my friends. I don't care what they think. Like, I even don't even like my writing until my editor reads it and they give me their feedback. I'm like, okay, so this works. Got it. I know, and I know what I need to change. I love the revision process, and most aspiring writers hate it because they think that it means that they can't write if they have to change something. That's not what that means. That's not what that means at all. I'm telling you right now, all the best books you love, the magic happened when they had to revise their work. And that's where you have to really learn how to take criticism, learn how to take feedback, and learn how to use it to better yourself. And you have to just read a lot. I tell people all the time, read within your genre. That's very, very important. Whatever genre you want to write, you need to understand the rules in order to break the rules. And so definitely read that, but also read outside of your genre. And sometimes when I want to, I've heard this with a lot of fantasy writers, and I can totally see this being very good advice, is that a lot of times with fantasy books, you are talking about having to develop like governments and, you want to deal with war. Read nonfiction books about like the fall of Rome and things like that. Read those books so you can then understand how this structure works, and you can then co-opt it to what you need and to fit your standard. And it needs to because it still needs to feel like something, even in fantasy, it needs to feel familiar to something that a reader can see in the real world to kind of anchor it a little bit. You want to have that. And it takes time to understand all those different nuances. And so you really need to just like get a writing group or some kind of support system. And that was what was good about Pitch War. The really good thing about Pitch Wars was, I mean, the agent showcase, that was great, but it was really the community you got. Because I met so many other writers and I'm still friends with them Some of them have gotten book deals. They've gone off and got success and hit the New York Times bestseller list. And we still talk to this day. It's like I got this whole community of people that like, hey, can you read this for me? Can we swap stories? That's what you really need as a writer. Because I think a lot of times being a writer is very solo. You're kind of in your room by yourself. It's very lonely. It's hard. Even to this day, I'm published. It's hard to talk about writing stuff with my friends because they don't understand. It's just like, well, why can't you just give your book to Oprah? It's like,
Yes, let
gosh.
me just call her up.
Yeah, it's like it's not that easy. So you definitely need that support system, and you need to find it any way that you can, and kind of just be able to commiserate, to vent, to bounce ideas off of. You can do it, and just be tenacious. Don't give up. I had so many rejections over the course of my years. You cannot give up. If it's something that's your dream, just keep at it. You never know. The Black Queen was not the first manuscript I wrote. That wasn't my pitch for book. I wrote a whole other book that didn't sell. It got me my agent, but it didn't sell. The Black Queen was the book that I wrote while I was trying to get my first book sold. And so then the Black Queen sold. And so
Yeah,
you definitely
wow.
just gotta keep at it. Just don't stop. Like just keep writing. All you need is one yes. And once you get that yes, things can really take off for you.
I also think that's like a great like analogy to like Amir and Marcel's situation. Like like Marcel could not give up to like get justice for his brother.
No.
And a
No.
lot of people
And
told him no,
yes. And,
but he kept
and he,
going.
yes, and it got dangerous. It gets dangerous as well for them. Like it's just you have to be tenacious in your beliefs sometimes, and realize that sometimes people aren't going to understand that you're right until you show them that you're right. Why you're right.
Yeah. Well, I think you've shown us in both of these books, like I
Oh,
think, I mean, recommend them to everyone.
oh, thank you.
I'm literally going to bring this copy to my friend at one of our local high schools when I see her later. And
No,
yeah, so to our customers, you can pick up The Black Queen now. It's, The Black Queen is out and Wander in the Dark comes out on January 30th. And
yes,
if you really want to show some love, pre-order it.
yes. And if they go on my Instagram page, I'm giving away pre-order gifts. So if you want some
Ooh,
pre-order gifts, I got
yes.
character cards of Amir and Marcel, some authentic Mardi Gras beads that I'm giving away,
How
signed book plate.
fun.
Yes.
And what's your Insta?
It's at Brown Boy Writing.
Okay, perfect. So y'all
Yes.
follow and then follow us at Friendly City Books.
Yes.
Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. Got to do that whole like and subscribe. And this was
And I can't wait to come into Friendly City so I can sign some books for you guys. Because
come visit.
I love everything you guys are doing. It's so important. And I'm so happy that you guys are leading these kinds of discussions.
Thank you so much. Well, I've loved it. This has been such a fun discussion. Thank you so much for spending this time with us today. And get the books, y'all. All
Yes.
right. And with that, I'm just going to close it out and say thank you and happy reading.